Welcome to the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev, where we explore and share experiences, stories, and lessons 7 days a week from across the games industry, helping you make the best game you can. Stay tuned for today's episode. Good morning, Overload Nation. Welcome to another episode of the Daily Dev Talk, talking to game developers from across the world to bring you stories, experiences, and lessons 7 days a week. Today, I'm joined with Kiba Scott?
Zyba.
So, Zyba, that's it. I knew I was going to get it wrong. To talk about his game, Girls Like Robots, from PopCannibal. Zyba, talk about yourself first, please.
Well, I'm the Midwestern U.S., but now living in Boston, and I have been making games full-time independently for about 5 years now. Before that, I was doing university IT and Linux consulting, but always had my eye on games, so I'm really happy to be doing that.
Okay. So, how many other games you worked on before?
Well, there's a lot of games I've worked on. I mean, how many am I willing to admit? Because a lot of them are, a lot of those early games are kind of terrible, but um, I've got at least two on the Xbox, Xbox Live indie games, Moon Taxi and Fish Listening to Radio. After that came Girls Like Robots. More recently, Elegy for a Dead World, and I'm working on some new stuff.
Mm-hmm. Cool, sounds all over the place. So tell me about your studio, PopCannibal. How many people is it, and what's the structure?
So PopCannibal legally is just me, but I have been working with contractors because I don't have all the talents that I would want to get all the quality that I want into my games. So I've been lucky to find some great people to work with, and most consistently I've been working with Luigi Guadieri. We're on our third game together now, and he's a brilliant artist who's currently living in Boston.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So tell us about Girls Like Robots and what you wanted the player to experience.
So Girls Like Robots is a seating arrangement puzzle game where all of the playing pieces are faces and the rules are their emotions, and you need to arrange for happiness or to make them angry or whatever we're doing that level. And it's tied together with this epic, 6-hour long story about love and dancing and volcanoes and an alien invasion. And it has an authentic, original string band soundtrack. Um, and the real, the heart, the challenge of it is it's sort of like planning a wedding. It's putting everybody in seats and making them happy, and you can't please everyone all the time. You just can't. So you gotta break some hearts to save the day.
Wow, that's very original. I had a suspicion there'd be a volcano involved, and it did feel very. It sounded very Western, but it was in the town, so it didn't quite look that Western. So,
That's it. So that sound is actually
cool.
that's more of an Eastern folk sound. So it's called string band music. So the band is actually my aunt and uncle. For 25 years, along with a friend of theirs, have been professionally a string band. And one of their albums came out around the time I was starting to work on the game, and they sent me the CD, and I just loved how incredibly happy and positive some of these old tunes were, and just wanted that feeling for my game.
Interesting string band. I've noticed this kind of music before in other games, but I did not know what it was called. I just didn't know. Just really didn't know what it was. So tell me, when it came to promoting the game, what methods worked and what didn't work?
Um, I have gone a lot of different directions with this game. It's been interesting. Um, I haven't stopped sort of working on it and putting it out on different platforms since it came out originally, like 2.5 years ago, I think, October 2012. Um, so for the first release, we actually were partnered with Adult Swim. They were our publisher, so they have Adult Swim's a part of Turner Broadcasting. They have a late night cable TV channel, um, a lot of popular weird cartoons, but they also have had a really good string of game publishing. So I connected with them, and they ran advertisements for a while on their TV in between shows, and we got they were able to reach all the reviewers and get everybody's attention, and that worked really well. After that, I've put it out on a few more platforms by myself, and that's been a whole mess of different struggles.
Could you name any other platforms?
Sure. So Steam was, of course, that's for PC games and indies. That's a very important platform. It's where a lot of core revenue comes from. Of course, as you said, my game is, as we've described it, it's very happy, it's very bright, it's colorful, and it's not in, at least what I understand, is the core demographic of a lot of Steam gamers.
Hmm.
Especially since because I went with Adult Swim, we did publish on mobile first, even though I developed for desktop first. I think there was a bit of culture clash getting it on, and right as it was time for me to start getting on Steam, that's when they invented Greenlight, the sort of users vote process for putting games onto Steam. Um, so it was actually a bit of an uphill battle to bring this happy, shiny game through the audience of core players onto Steam.
Hmm. I can understand that. I can understand that being the core demographic. So, how did you go about funding the game? Again, what methods worked and what didn't work?
Um, well, initially, I mean, the most important thing is before I went full time into games, I had a real job. I had, I was a responsible adult for many years, saving my money and working for a salary. And
Hmm.
so I started with a bit of a runway for it. And um, initially, I declared I'm going to spend 6 months and $5,000 on this game. The money was for contracting and promotion. After things started going very well, I just doubled that to a year and $10,000 and set that as my initial time frame and budget, and mostly stuck to that for the first release. I've spent a lot of time on it since then for subsequent releases.
Cool. So, majority of it has been the savings, self-funded.
Yep.
Hmm. So, how did you go about QAing the game and getting feedback for it?
Um, Lots of different ways. So I'm in Boston, where there's a very active game development culture group, lots of meetups. So initially, I would just go to regular meetings and show the game to anyone who would play it, and that's a lot of people here who would just experienced people or inexperienced people and watch over their shoulder and talk to them and get a lot of feedback, which is sort of how I got to that first quality bar level where it started getting attention from Adult Swim. Um, when they chose to publish it, they actually hired QA to work on it. Uh, I've also published on, I had to do my own QA for Steam. I published on Windows Phone, which had some level of QA done by the App Campus team at Windows. And you've actually caught me at a very interesting point. Tomorrow, the game releases on the Wii U in Japan.
Hmm.
And I actually partnered with Unity Japan, and they did the port to for the Wii U and the translation. And they had another QA team. So it's third or fourth time through professional QA. Uh, this game is should be pretty well. I'm not going to promise bug free, but it runs pretty darn solidly now.
Hmm. Can you tell me how you found some of these active groups in Boston?
Um, Meetup sites like meetup.com and Eventbrite and things
Uh,
like that, those are usually the tools used for that. Trying to think initially, probably met some people before Twitter. Had my eye on Boston before I moved here. But once you get here, once you go to one meeting, you get on a mailing list, and everybody stands up at one meeting and says, next week come to my other meeting about this or that. And if I wanted to, I could be going to meetings and talks, almost every day of the week.
I thought that was the case. Meetup and Eventbrite.
Yeah.
So, what was cut from the game and why?
Not a whole lot was cut from the game. There was an extra bit where we had a few aliens and a few extra puzzles, but um, the game is really quite long for a game of its type. So it's a puzzle game, and uh, nobody complains that it's too short. It's really got a lot of great content. I'm the kind of person who generally, if I like a game, I finish playing it, and so I sort of made that in mind. And there's new content all the way through to the end. There were a few more, tracks off my family band, the Piecemeal String Band, their album I'd like to put in, but they had lyrics that were just sort of really threw you out of the game. Some of these old time songs where they have lyrics about the difficulties of working in a gold mine and um, stuff that didn't really mesh with the game, but it was beautiful tunes, and I wish I could have found a way to get more of that in.
Hmm. Wanted to fit the music in. So, what was your biggest thing? What was the biggest thing you learned while working on the game?
Probably a lot of it was the power of refining the game by showing it to a lot of people, having figuring out how to get both get good feedback from people or just read into their experiences to what's going to make it better to doing that while I was making it. I think that's what I really learned. Looking back on it now and having worked on a few other games, I think one of the things that sticks out to me is I feel like, particularly for that game, I had a real strong sense of what I wanted it to be and exactly where I was going with it for the most part. And that was very helpful in development to really understand my goal. I've worked on some other projects since then where it's been a more meandering path to get to where I want to be. And maybe I'm just being nostalgic for maybe it was actually more difficult than I remember, but that focus, knowing what you want, is really valuable.
Hmm. Okay. So, what was the worst thing that happened, and how did you overcome it?
So I talked about earlier about how Greenlight was sort of a real struggle, and it actually took like 384 days, I think, to get through Greenlight. And I was worried then, so if it was that difficult to get my product into the market, how's it going to be received? Um, so I was thinking about what's the right way to introduce this game to players, and it was going to be released near Valentine's Day. So I actually sort of cold emailed an employee at Valve, the company that owns Steam, the distribution platform that I don't, as an employee, I didn't really even know. And I asked them what they were doing for Valentine's Day. And I had my artist take the Steam storefront and Photoshop in a picture of a Valentine's Day sale that we had invented, and of course, put our game in. And we had a cute little picture with their own mascots under a tree and some, love hearts. And we sent this to them, and their reply was basically, uh, sounds great. Let's do that. Why don't you just send us this picture and we'll run it? And they actually ran our picture of a Valentine's sale and put some other games in a sale just because we asked them, hey, let's do a sale for Valentine's Day. And that was a lot of great uh, visibility for Girls Like Robots. And it transferred to a lot of sales. And if you look on Steam, the reviews are actually really good. People actually really like the game. So that was a really satisfying way to overcome this whole green light problem.
Interesting. You turned a weakness into a strength. That's really interesting. Wow, that's really cool. So, how did that go? You just asked the employee at Valve, just asked it.
Yeah, I said, let's do a Valentine's Day sale. Here's a picture of what it could look like. And they said, sounds good to us. Let's actually use that picture. We never expected them to actually use our picture. That was really exciting.
So, so I'm under the assumption then that that person who emailed was like a head of sales or head of marketing or something of the
No,
sort.
Valve has a very flat hierarchy structure where a lot of employees are empowered to make a lot of decisions.
Interesting. And oh, what the question was now. Oh yeah. So if someone was to go on to say Google Images, would they be able to find that
The Steam
Valentine's Day,
Valentine's sale. That's a good question. I know I
like the
haven't
actual
looked into
image?
that. I don't think they've ever done a second Valentine's Day sale. So if you find
No,
one,
no, well, no, I mean, like, Google Images, Steam Valentine's Sale 2000 and whatever year it was. Would they be able to find it, you think?
I don't know. I'm typing right now.
Ah,
It auto completes Steam Valentine's sale 2015.
this year, okay.
Sorry, 2013. Um,
13. Hmm.
yeah, I can see the pictures. It says "Have a Steamy Valentine's." It's the second one that I'm seeing, right on Engadget's website. And there's Girls Like Robots right top of the sale. Special
Oh,
games for that
cool.
special someone. We wrote all that text.
Interesting. That's a cool way of turning a weakness into a strength. Wow. So, what was the best game dev purchase you made? Whether it was a software license, a top quality piece of hardware or equipment, or simply a comfortable chair and a good desk?
I'm guessing a lot of indie devs would say Unity, and that seems like a boring answer, though that's really important. Um, the very first, I can say, as soon as I filed for my company to make it official, the very first piece of software I bought was Fraps, FRAPS,
Okay.
the video recording software.
Oh, yeah.
It's a little bit maybe old and outdated. Maybe there's better stuff now, but it works really well. And I maybe it's not the best thing ever, but for me, it's a real symbol of the importance of sharing what you're working on as you're doing it, after you're doing it, just being able to record video from your game, it's easy to forget that that's just, especially more and more every day, the most powerful way to connect people to your game is to show them what you're doing regularly and vividly.
I agree. So, what game dev related book, lecture, or learning resource can you recommend?
That's a tough one. I have some books that I've learned things from, but and I like books in general, but I can't think of one that really jumps out. But uh, the best learning resource would be other game developers. Like if you want to be developing games, find other people who are doing it or just want to be doing it, and meet up with them to talk about whatever you can about the difficulties of actually making them, the business side of making things. I mean, I'm generally really not very business minded by default. At least I think I am. So meeting with a lot of other game developers who deal with this regularly has been invaluable to me. So
Hmm.
other people, find other people.
Other people. Other people. Like an Evernote or Trello, do you have a useful or productivity enhancing software, app, extension, or website?
So I'll use, I guess because it's some of my old school Linux roots, is like I'll use Track, TRAC, for tracking bugs, because I approach a lot from a programming standpoint. And also, it's sort of boring and pedestrian, but I'll use a Microsoft OneNote because it just happens to have been installed on most everything I have to do a nice synchronized to-do list. Um, and to-do lists I find are actually really good stress reliever, sort of that running my business, dealing with multiple games at once. I find there's all these tiny things that just start to like pick at me, and I have to remember, oh, I need to do these 4 things. And the act of putting them in a to-do list just lets me clear my mind of them. And so when I start to feel like stressed and I don't really know why, it's probably because I'm letting too many small details build up, and I just need to write them all down, forget about them, come back and look at my to-do list later.
I get you. Keep it all organized. So, Zeba, what
Zyba.
advice? What? Zyber? Oh, I'm still getting it wrong. I'm looking at a zebra as well. That doesn't help.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. That's my fault.
Okay. So, what advice can you give to aspiring game developers, small indie studios, and people trying to get to where you are today?
Um, you don't need anybody's permission to make games. Um, but if you really want to finish a game, pick a small scope. So if games are in your heart, whether it's making a living off them or just making them, period, and there's really no shame in just wanting to make games just for fun and not making a living out of it, um, you don't need to wait for anybody. Just do it. And if you do want to make a living off it, which is a order of magnitude higher, talk to people. People are your greatest resource. Meet other developers. And from my view, the game development community, big and small, has been just amazingly friendly and helpful. So uh, get to know people.
Yeah, exactly. And that is also the purpose of this as well, Daily Dev Talk, to get people talking about the games and the names and networking and
Yeah.
such and learning experiences every day. So, what is next for you, and what's the best way to contact you?
So Luigi, my artist, and I are working on a game about sailing. Um, we haven't officially announced a title yet, but we're working on a physics-based sailing game where you find all these pieces as you're walking around these islands, and you glue them together to make boats, and you draw a sail out of energy, and you hope that what you made is seaworthy enough to get you to the next island and the next set of cool powers.
Mm-hmm.
And
And what's the best way to contact you?
PopCannibal, that's my website. At PopCannibal, that's my Twitter handle. Zyba, Z-I-B-A, at popcannibal.com, that's my email.
Okay, cool. Well, Zyber, it appears that we're out of time for this episode. It's been very good talking to you, and that's one way to turn a weakness into a strength, and eventually getting on the front page on Steam. That's so cool. That's a very cool story.
Thank you.
Great talking to you.
Like,
Wish you well on this sailing game.
thank you.
Stay tuned, Overload Nation. More videos to come. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Daily Dev Talk with me, Adrian Nantchev. If you are a game developer that wants to get your name and game out there, and to share your experiences and stories, or you have feedback or opinions of the show, then contact me at info@gameoverload.co.uk. That's info@gameoverload.co.uk. Stay tuned for tomorrow's episode, more to come.